Thank you all very much for coming out and joining us tonight. Those of you watching on the video, thank you for tuning in and watching as well. If you don't know me, my name is Corey Reddicup. I'm the CEO of the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that this event and all the work of the Langley Chamber is on the traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Matsqui, Semiahmoo, and Katzie First Nations. And we are partnering with the Abbotsford Chamber of Commerce on this event, and they work on the traditional territory of the Stolo people. So we do want to express our gratitude and respect for gathering here tonight. If you don't know what the Langley Chamber is, or the Abbotsford Chamber for that matter, the Langley Chamber is Langley's largest business association. We represent over 1,100 member businesses. We are a private, non-government, non-partisan, not-for-profit, which exists to serve and support and promote our members in Langley businesses. As I mentioned tonight, we're hosting this event in partnership with the Abbotsford Chamber of Commerce, who similarly are focused on supporting and bolstering business and economic activity in Abbotsford. And then those two organizations together, along with the Mission Regional Chamber and the Chilliwack Chamber, have formed the Fraser Valley Business Coalition. And we partner throughout the years on issues and initiatives that are important to the whole of the Fraser Valley. And now with this riding covering Langley, Abbotsford, we thought it made a lot of sense to build on that partnership and host tonight's event together. And we really do feel it's important to create opportunities for our members, but more than that, the broader community to hear from and engage with the candidates seeking all levels of government office. We hold these for municipal, provincial, and federal elections, and we appreciate you all being here as attendees, and to the candidates for taking the time to be here as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping and ground rules so you know what's going on here. The exits, if you need to exit, you came in one at the back there. There is one right here if we need to get out in any emergency, and then there's another one further down on the sidewalls here. So if we need to have a sudden exit, you have three options there to your right. Washrooms, if you need them, are at the very back, again, left of where you came into the building here. So really today's event is meant to create a platform to hear from the candidates in the upcoming provincial election. Tonight we're focusing on the candidates in the Langley-Abbotsford riding for our provincial election for MLA. So tonight, the Chamber has invited every candidate that was publicly announced that they were running or had registered with Elections BC. We issued these invitations several weeks ago, and we were happy to have several candidates taking the time to join us today. Today's format will see our candidates on stage together, answering a series of questions which will be drawn from four topic areas. So those are the cost of living and doing business, jobs and the economy, housing and infrastructure, and community health and safety. For several weeks, we've been accepting questions through our webpage for this event, and we've received several, so I want to thank you for those. Some we will ask as is, because they really captured something salient, and some we got a bunch around a certain topic, and we kind of coalesced those and woven those together. Tonight's a chance to hear from the candidates on these issues, and we'll give them the chance to answer questions or not answer the questions, and we'll hopefully glean information that will help you, the voters, make your decision as we head up to October 19th. Before we start, I do want to take a moment, and when I'm done here, maybe we can give a round of applause to thank them. I want to thank the candidates for putting their names forward. It's not an easy task, but it's essential. There's lots of talk of democracy nowadays, but democracy just doesn't happen. We can have elections, but they only kind of mean something if people put their names on the ballot. So I know that everyone, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of commitment and sacrifice, so maybe you can join me in thanking our candidates here, not here, these ridings, other ridings, everyone who's put their name forward this election. Thank you very much for standing and serving the community. And I'd like to ask for your respect as audience, your respect during the discussions tonight. If you disagree with anything you're going to hear on stage tonight, there has never been more opportunities for you to voice that displeasure. Whether you volunteer, or you donate, or you go on social media, or there's a number of ways you can voice that. Shouting, booing, hissing shouldn't be one of them. So let's keep it civil and make sure that everyone can hear from the candidates as we have our discussion tonight. So to begin, I'd like to invite our candidates to come up and take a spot on the front here. We have Karen Long running as an independent. Karen, up you go. John Alday, the BC NDP, and Alex Joel, Libertarian candidate. So again, let me one more round of applause to welcome our candidates to the stage. So our format tonight is going to include opening remarks from the candidates, which will be up to 2 minutes for each. Then we'll move into the questions. As I said, we'll have the questions are drawn from the four topic areas I outlined earlier, and we're going to have 4 rounds of those. So we're going to be questions from each of those topic themes. Each candidate will be asked a question from that topic area and have up to 2 minutes to answer the question before we move on to the next candidate. Candidates, when you're at 10 seconds left in that time, you will hear, so you know to finish your thought. That doesn't mean stop. That just means you've got 10 seconds to finish your thought and wrap up. At 2 minutes, when we need to move on, you'll hear a few more dings, so you know it's time to move on, make sure we have the time for all the candidates and all the questions. In each round, I may pose a follow-up question to one of the candidates, and they will have an additional 2 minutes to answer that. Each candidate will have an equal number of follow-up questions, so we're going to keep this nice and fair. And after we've asked all the questions from each of our categories, we'll wrap up with closing remarks, and that'll end the formal portion of the event. So let's get started. Before we dive into the questions and discussions, we do have 2 minutes set aside for each of you for opening remarks and introductions. So you can see on the timer here where your clock is on the time, and again, we'll let you know when you have 10 seconds left with the ding. But 2 minutes for opening remarks and introductions. Maybe we can start with you, John.
The microphones, is it on?
There you go.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to see us this evening. I believe that these are a really important part of the democratic process, having candidates get together and talk about what we stand for, what our parties stand for, or if we're running independently, what your values and beliefs are. I'd like to thank the Chamber for organizing the event, Chambers at both Abbotsford and Langley for having us this evening. For those who don't know me, I've been in town in Langley Township for over 20 years with my wife. I was born and raised in the prairies. My wife and I moved here in 2005 to Walnut Grove, where I was with Parks Canada. I had a career with Parks Canada for 34 years prior to politics. And when we moved to the Lower Mainland, my job was to manage the historic fort in Fort Langley. I have mentioned I came here to manage the fort, and people have said, I love the Fort Pub, but it's the fur trade fort, if anybody knows Fort Langley. And my wife was finishing her medical training at that time. She's a doctor, a family doctor, and has worked throughout Fraser Health Authority in Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Langley, and now as a hospitalist in Surrey. And so I hear every day about the challenges with our healthcare system. Our 3 kids have all gone through the public school system in Walnut Grove, and James Kennedy for elementary school, and then to Walnut Grove Secondary. In 2012, I was given the opportunity to do an assignment at Pacific Rim National Park, and that was my kind of call to politics. And I was ran 3 times, and was elected successfully twice in Cloverdale, Langley City. This past May, I have given that up. It was the toughest decision of my life, but I'm now running fully all in with David Eby and the NDP because of the important decisions facing our province right now and our community. And so over the course of this evening, I'll be talking about some of the things that are important to me and our party, the positions we're putting forward, and I look forward to the questions and discussion that we'll have in the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And on my order here, I had Alex next. Did you want to do your introductions?
My name is Alex Joel. I'm with the BC Libertarian Party. We are a smaller party, but we've been around since 1986, basically wanting to have lower taxes, more choice, and real freedom in our province. First time I ran provincially was in Langley East, and I did get a chance to speak at a Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce all candidates meeting. And while both the BC Liberals and the BC NDP have had their crack at government since 2017, I don't think anybody in this room can say that their lives are necessarily better than it was then. So both those governments have had their chance at power, and both of them are going to talk. Of course, the BC Conservatives are now kind of inheriting that right of center spot. Karen was wanting to run with BC United, and we have John running with the NDP. So while they are probably really great representatives here in the community, not necessarily is it the same to be said for the party colors that they represent. I moved to Langley in 2015 with my wife and son, and yeah, every time I get a chance to get on a ballot, I do, because frankly, there is a really great argument to be made for not voting. If there's not somebody on that ballot that you absolutely can endorse, there's no reason to vote for a lesser evil. So I absolutely thrive on that role, to be that person to get somebody to the ballot box and participate in the democratic system. So again, thank you everyone for coming today, because you are also part of it. If you guys aren't here, we're just talking into a mic and talking into a camera. So thank you everyone, and I look forward to some great questions.
Thank you, Alex. And Karen Long.
Thank you. Thank you to the Chambers for hosting this event and all the good work you do. My name is Karen Long, and I'm running as an independent. I have lived in and been involved in this community for over 25 years. I know the issues and concerns. I have the connections, the work ethic, and the leadership experience to get things done. I believe in free enterprise. As a former co-owner of Bob's Bar and Grill and 2 other local restaurants, I know the challenges that small business owners face every day. This is a historic time in BC politics. Many former BC United colleagues, including 5 former BC United MLAs, are running as independents to make sure that voters feel they have a center-right option so that decisions in Victoria reflect the true will of the people. During my 25 years as a community leader in Langley and Aldergrove, I have held positions in many organizations: director, secretary, treasurer, executive director. I'm the past president of the Rotary Club of Aldergrove, the Aldergrove Fair, the BC Farm Museum, and I've been involved with the Aldergrove Business Association for many years. I founded the Langley Volunteer Bureau in 2016, which today connects over 10,000 volunteers annually. As your independent MLA, I will work tirelessly to consult widely and advocate for common sense solutions, ones that won't toe party lines. A team of elected independent MLAs would hold the balance of power in the next government, ensuring the right and the left work together for moderate centrist solutions. I want Langley Abbotsford to have a seat at that table of independence in Victoria. I have committed my heart and soul to this community for over 25 years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for those opening remarks, and we're going to dive in now to our questions. So our first category tonight is the cost of living and doing business. Karen, actually, I have you as up first with this question. So recently, in the last few weeks, since the election campaign started, both the NDP and the BC Conservatives have come out with competing plans for tax cuts and rebates to address affordability and leave more money in the people in Langley Abbotsford's pockets. As an independent candidate, not part of either of those parties, what will you fight for to address the persistent challenges of the high cost of living here in Langley?
Thank you, Corey. If income tax brackets do not rise with inflation, people whose wages have simply grown with inflation can get inadvertently pushed into higher tax categories. I think that ensuring payroll exemption thresholds are indexed to inflation makes sense. The paid sick leave program introduced by the BC NDP in 22 had good intentions coming on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's placed a heavy burden on businesses and probably has unintended negative consequences for employers and should be tweaked. I would support the BC Chamber's recommendations to allow for partial sick days, implement a minimum hours work requirement for eligibility for paid sick days, amend the Employment Standard Act to reduce the number of paid sick days to 3. Cap the total number of sick days someone can claim in a year, regardless of how many different employers they have. I would also support considering solutions that would address small mom and pop businesses that experience large rental and lease increases and demolition and renoviction through provincial assessments and/or tax reform. We need to support our business community to prosper and not burden them with added taxes and bureaucracy.
Thank you. John, I'm going to come to you next with this question. You'll have 2 minutes as well. Still in the cost of living category. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, can feel the pressure of increased cost of living. Gas, groceries, rent, residents are having to stretch their paychecks further. On a residential level, when we survey our businesses, the number one concern is the cost of living and affordability. So what do you want to do as an MLA, now that you've moved into the provincial sphere, what do you want to do as an MLA to address the cost of living and help people with general affordability that the NDP hasn't done yet?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. So since getting the nomination for this election mid-July, I've been out door knocking almost every day, and like you and your members, I'm hearing on the doorsteps of the riding here that cost of living is one of the top 3 issues. It's the kind of thing that keeps people awake at night. They're saying that And I'm hearing across like the spectrum, young families, seniors, that at the end of the month, there's not money left over in the bank account, and that's concerning. And so one of the first things David Eby has announced as part of this campaign was this past Sunday. He indicated that we would reduce the first income tax bracket by $10,000, which would immediately save $1,000 from 90% of British Columbians in taxes. And that would continue for the 4 years of this mandate. And so it would be $1,000 that are currently being paid for provincial taxes would go back into people's pockets. Now, he's talked about not waiting until you have to file taxes. It would come as a rebate right up front to help with the high cost of groceries, the high cost of gas, those types of things. And over the 4 years, our plan would put more money back into the pockets of British Columbians than what the Conservatives are saying. You wouldn't receive the full benefit of their plan until 2029. So their plan would make people wait. Ours is immediate. There are also things that we've done, like capping fees or increases on BC Hydro. That has saved families money. We've frozen ICBC rates and given actually rebates back. Over the last 4 years, people have received about $500 for the average family on ICBC rates. And so driving is expensive, and that helps keep those costs. I think it's questionable if it's affordable, but at least they're not going to go up any higher. There are many other measures being talked about. We've seen rent starting to come down because of the housing measures that are being taken. BC is the only place that's actually seeing a decrease in rent because of the work we're doing on the housing front. And so these are a few of the examples that we're doing to help put more money back into the pockets of British Columbians. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that. Alex, Joel, I'm going to come to you next. Like residents, businesses have seen operational costs like taxes, rent, and materials rise rapidly, and labor costs have been pushed to new records. Both the people on the stage have talked about what they would look to see for affordability for businesses, for residents. What do you, as if you were elected MLA, want to do to make it easier for both the people in Langley, Abbotsford, and the small business community in Langley, Abbotsford to be successful in an increasingly expensive environment?
So the BC Libertarian Party was against the carbon tax right as soon as the BC Liberals rolled it out. So it's nice to see that now the BC United was against it, and the BC Conservatives and even the NDP have suggested that the consumer carbon tax is going to be lifted as long as they get the federal permission. So what we like to do as a smaller party is not necessarily am I going to get elected. What I am going to do is be up here bringing ideas to the table so that these are going to be adopted by other parties. The BC Liberals also, before they transitioned to the United Party, they were talking about ending the ICBC monopoly, another thing that we were advocating against so that we would bring down the cost of insurance for everyday British Columbian drivers. Other ways that we look to improve affordability, specifically for businesses. One of them is to eliminate the employer health tax, which is an automatic burden on the business first and foremost after they got rid of MSP, but also it is a disincentivizer for growth in your company. Otherwise, you end up paying a higher rate. We want to turn the PST into a value-added tax like the GST so that that business isn't having to pay twice on everything. They're able to save money. And then finally, I mean, there's other ways that we can bring down affordability for housing. Like we want to revisit the Residential Tenancy Act so that we're able to make it more attractive for businesses to come and create more rental housing, which will drive down the price further. So yeah, I mean, there's so many other ways we can help. We can eliminate all other energy taxes, really make sure that the ability to heat and cool your home stays as low as possible. And the last but not least, and we're looking to create a $50,000 personal tax exemption so that every tax dollar you make up to $50,000 is income tax free for British Columbians.
Thank you, Alex, Joel, for that. I want to stick with this category a little bit because affordability is the top concern, and you mentioned that you're hearing it as you are out campaigning. When you look at the stats, international immigration means our population is going to continue to grow. But we are seeing a trend of out-migration to other provinces, notably Alberta. We just at the Chamber had 3 members this summer who have closed their memberships of the Chamber because they've moved to Calgary and one to Vancouver Island. At an event 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago now, someone pulled me aside and told me how upset they were that their nephews don't see a future in BC and are now moving out of the country altogether. I want each of you to answer this, and maybe we'll start with John and work our way down the table here. If you're elected, what would you say to those businesses that have left Langley? What would you say to those nephews that are going to leave BC because they don't see a future here? What would you tell them about why the next 4 years are going to be more optimistic and that they'll have a future here in Langley, Abbotsford?
Great, thanks, Corey. I think that this issue of having BC as the best place to live is something that we need to focus on. Personally, I have 2 daughters who are at university, one in Ontario and one in Nova Scotia, who have said they may not come back to BC. And as a parent, that breaks my heart. I want all of our kids to see themselves having a future in our province. And similarly, I want to have all businesses see themselves have a business in BC. Right now, there's I think, a bit of a false narrative or misunderstanding about how well British Columbia's economy is doing. Of the major provinces, so excluding all except PEI, which is the only one that has exceeded the economic growth, BC has the highest economic growth in Canada. And so we are seeing that there's a good investment system here. Businesses are seeing that, and it's across sectors. It's from, we have new mines that are actually coming to BC. We have small businesses. So there is growth happening across sectors, including the business sector. So I would just simply say, let's work together as the provincial government with businesses. Let's identify where there might be those barriers. Right now, though, we've announced already through this platform helping with skilled trades development and training workers that can help certain construction companies, as an example, grow. It's an area that we need that labor in, and so those types of efforts are being taken, are being made to help grow that sector. We have the lowest small business tax rate in the country, and I think that needs to be recognized. When we took the largest cut in taxes for individuals in British Columbia, the removal of the MSP premiums, it went to a different system. And that now 90% of businesses do not pay that. So there were exemptions made for small businesses to make sure that they're competitive. And that's something that we're proud of and we'll continue to work on to have businesses here in BC.
Thank you, John Aldag, for that. Alex, I'm going to come to you. I'm jumping ahead of myself. We have worked our way down the table, I said. So, Karen, we'll take your question on this, and then again, it's what would you say to those businesses and people who don't see a future in BC and are leaving?
Yes, it is quite disturbing that young people are leaving because they can't afford. We talk to people, I'm not sure if John or Alex has spoken to people at the doors and their frustration of their family members. They're moving because it's just not affordable to have a home and raise their family. So as an independent MLA, my role in Victoria would be to listen to the majority government and the opposition, and to look at what policies that they have to address affordability, to address the housing, on how we can get people into housing, first-time homeowners, what kind of benefits, what kind of programs that they could do, as well as supporting businesses. So my role would be, as that, is to be the independent MLA that would kind of have to look at my community and see if those policies address the concerns of my community or not, and then that would be determined on how I would vote or support their policy.
Thank you, Karen Long. And Alex, Joel, is that same question around those people who are leaving BC and don't see a future here.
So you got to look at what is attracting them away from BC. It's not necessarily that there's something in BC that they're running from. We live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. One of the advantages to a place like Alberta is they do have a slightly better tax incentive. One of the things we can do here as a provincial government is definitely make that more attractive. But the reality is they need somewhere to live, right? People want to live in the communities they grew up or somewhere close to that, so we need more housing. And so that's going to be working with the municipalities to try and really simplify the zoning. We're going to try and find a way to make sure that we have all sorts of different types of housing so that we have something available for everyone. And by driving down that cost, we're going to make it more possible for people to stay in their communities, but also building those homes is going to create more jobs. We're going to have high skilled roles for the people coming out of high school, that they're going to have a long-term outlook, and they're going to be able to build their own businesses, whether it's in construction or any other related fields. One of the things that a provincial government can do is also stop the inflation. Obviously, the federal government has a much bigger role in printing the money, but also every time that we go into a deficit, we start spending against the future. We have, what is an $8 billion deficit now? By overspending, we're adding more money into the economy, and we're driving up the prices of a lot of things. So the first thing a provincial government can do is stop taxing the future. So what do you tell somebody that what is it going to be in 4 years? Well, actually, in 4 years, it's going to be really hard for any changes that the person that goes to Victoria is going to be able to implement. But the good news is down the road for the next generation that we're going to have a better province, hopefully.
Thank you, Alex, for that. We're going to be moving on to our next topic category, which is community health and safety. This first question is going to go to Karen Long. Karen, with a seniors population of nearly 40%, Langley has more seniors than the regional average. However, we know that Fraser Health has a shortage of thousands of beds for seniors care, including a shortage here in Langley. Everyone has a senior in their lives that they care about, or a senior themselves. What are your thoughts on how to ensure Langley's growing seniors population has a place to call home when they're no longer able to live independently?
I'm sorry to do this to you. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on how to ensure Langley's growing seniors population has places to call home when they're no longer able to live independently?
It is seniors are in my experience working with the local seniors organizations. There is a need for long-term care and be able to afford a place to live with the costs of being able to afford a place to live, Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nope, all good. Thank you, Karen. In our community health and safety category, I'm going to go to Alex Joel next. And similarly to how fast we are growing on a seniors population, Langley is the fastest growing community in Metro Vancouver overall. But that comes with growing pains, particularly in healthcare. Currently, Langley has lower than the Canadian average of beds per residence, and will continue to fall without further investment in healthcare in our community here in Langley, and Abbotsford is close behind as well. What would you do if elected to be MLA to fight for healthcare resources in Langley, Abbotsford for the people that call this area home?
I'm sure everybody saw the headline in the news that the Abbotsford Regional Hospital is on the brink of collapse. And this is unacceptable, and we need to have drastic changes. Successive governments here in BC have tried, tinkering here and there, and we've just seen the amount of care decrease significantly. People aren't even getting rooms; they're getting little alcoves, which we all know a loved one that's had an extended stay at a hospital. So we know that simply tinkering with the system is not going to make any changes. The BC Libertarian Party absolutely advocates for allowing people to get the best care they can obtain right here in BC. So people that are waiting for special treatments, waiting for special scans and tests, don't have to go to Mexico to get it. They don't have to go across the border. So we're advocating real change in the healthcare system, and what we're going to do with that, it's going to start to incentivize bringing more healthcare workers into it, because during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the lockdowns and the mandates, we actually saw the provincial government bringing in American private nurses to work here alongside our nurses, and they were getting paid twice as much. So clearly the problem is not that we're not willing to pay. The issue is getting the people. So allowing this two-tier system that we already have in almost all parts of the medical system, we just want to let all British Columbians have access to it instead of just federal workers, RCMP, and prisoners and whatnot. So huge changes are needed. Simply, like I said, just moving moving a zero here and there isn't going to make a difference. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're selling you a bad bag of goods.
Thank you, Alex. And then coming to John Aldag for the question in our community health and safety category. Alex just mentioned challenges at Abbotsford Hospital. We've seen in other parts of the province ongoing challenges with ER closures. And if they're not closed, hospitals that are open, the wait times for care often stretch for hours and hours. If you were elected and the NDP returned to government, what do you think needs to be done to solve these ongoing challenges with basic access to the healthcare system?
This is one area that I really like to talk about as I'm going door knocking and hearing about the frustrations and challenges. Because I think the first thing we have to do is admit that there are challenges. 12 hours in waiting for emergency care is not acceptable. And so there's room for improvement. There's room for a huge amount of improvement. But I also am deeply committed to maintaining a public health care system that's accessible for all. So how do we do that? Well, the NDP have already started things, and I'm not sure that it's been communicated well enough, but there's a lot of things underway already that are starting to make a difference. As an example, in the last year, over 800 family doctors were recruited in British Columbia. That helped 400,000 British Columbians without a family doctor get matched for that care. There's 900 internationally trained doctors are now have been licensed in British Columbia. That's a huge infusion of that foreign credentials that we often saw running restaurants and driving taxi cabs and things like that, now all of a sudden finding their way into providing the healthcare that they've been trained for. Over 6,000 nurses have been brought to the province. The Cloverdale Hospital is being built right now. It's under construction, and that will help add capacity within our region. Because Langley Hospital, Abbotsford, and Surrey are very stretched right now. There's the first new medical school opening at Simon Fraser University in Surrey, and it'll be taking students in 2026. That will have 50 students in the first year, ramping up to 150 students of locally trained kids that will be able to provide that much-needed medical care. Almost 150 spaces are being added province-wide through UBC. And so more doctors being trained through the UBC existing medical school. We're credentialing nurses that we know have been trained to the level of our standards, being recruited for British Columbia. There's a lot happening. It's not showing today, but I think that through the opening of the urgent and primary care centers and other things, British Columbians in the coming days, months, and weeks will see an improvement.
Thank you, John, for that. I'm going to start with one of the follow-ups. Remember, each of the candidates is going to get one follow-up question throughout the evening. This first one's going to go to John Aldag as well. In this category, it's community health and safety. So I want to not leave this category without asking a question around safety. John, businesses and residents alike are growing increasingly frustrated with crime, particularly theft, vandalism, and street disorder. This is one of the top priority areas for our Fraser Valley Business Coalition. You served for years as a member of parliament. I know this would have been on your radar then too. What new measures and actions would you advocate for as MLA for this area to enhance the public safety of Langley Abbotsford and prevent the type of street crime and disorder that we're seeing?
Yeah, this is, again, something that I think all of us have seen a change in over the last decade or even 2 decades. And there's, I think, several pieces that we need to work on. Federally, I was involved in legislation to change the bail system. And that is now working its way through to the provinces, so they have new tools that they can use to actually deal with this revolving door of criminals. Those tools are just starting to be used, but the intention is that when people shouldn't have bail, they shouldn't get bail. And so there's new legislation that's in place. But if the legislation's not working, then we need to let the federal government know that more needs to be done. So that is something that's underway right now. It's also, we've committed to bringing in additional teams of parole officers, prosecutors, and police officers to deal with these prolific offenders. And there'd be teams dedicated to increasing the patrols and the whole court, following through the court system and right through into bail, if people are not abiding by if they're sentenced and put on bail and not living by those conditions. So definitely some work there. We also can't ignore that a lot of the crime comes from homelessness, addictions, and mental health issues. And so there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done on housing the unhoused population, those living rough in our community. There are some that are not able to care for themselves. And so we've announced that there would be a program for those, and you have to meet 3 conditions. So we need to be very careful about forced treatment. But there are people with addictions, with mental health concerns, and who have suffered brain injury because of overdoses that cannot look after themselves. They will not recover. And they are a threat to themselves, they're a threat to our communities. And so we've said that there would be regional centers. When Riverview closed down, this was the kind of model that was supposed to be built, and so we have a plan now to make those happen. And the idea would be to have treatment centers around the province that the estimate is less than 500 British Columbians, but these are some of the most prolific offenders, would actually have a place to call home with the treatments necessary. So that's one example of how we can deal with this.
Thank you, John, for that. Our next category is jobs and the economy. The first question is going to be going to Alex Joel. Alex, the provincial government recently announced that the deficit for this year is now forecast to be $8.9 billion. That's the largest ever. Do you have concerns with our level of deficit spending? And do you believe we even need a plan to balance the budget? What's the libertarian view on debt and deficits?
Well, I'm glad I've already touched on this, so I can prove that we're consistent in that, yeah, definitely we need to get rid of the $8.9 billion deficit because it is just borrowing from our future, from our children, from our grandchildren. It's borrowing from the future, and it is for short-term gain. It's usually for political gain. It's for politicians to try and sell you on something here and now. So unfortunately, just like anything in life, short-term gain for long-term suffering. What is our plan to do so? There are plenty of ways that we can continue to support through some tax revenue. We're going to have massive cuts, though, in the administration. We're going to see massive bureaucratic cuts that are going to allow us to claw back some of that spending. So while we are going to introduce many income tax cuts through raising the exemption, we're going to end the consumer carbon tax. We advocate for still having a baseline tax revenue. As unlibertarian as that is, we do know that there are many services here in the province that people depend on, and we're going to continue to offer those to people. And really, like I said, slicing back the bureaucracy in many of our major ministries is going to be the way that we do so. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Alex. The next question in jobs and the economy is going to go to Karen Long. Karen, a lot of jobs and economic activity in this riding will be tied to and influenced by the Agricultural Land Reserve. Our Fraser Valley Business Coalition thinks the ALR needs to be reviewed to ensure it's meeting the needs of farmers and it's meeting its goal of supporting agricultural production. And when talking to businesses and farmers and residents, everyone seems to have their own opinion on the ALR and what needs to happen. What's yours?
My opinion on the ALR is something that we need to protect. I think it's something that we need to value, and it should not be, land should not be released lightly. We need to protect it for our farmers and for them to produce their food to help us sustain our food security. Yeah. So I appreciate that as well, but yeah. So that's for the ALR. My personal opinion would be to support the ALR and not to release land out of the ALR unless necessary, because it's a vital resource that we need to protect.
Thank you, Karen. And next question is going to John Aldag. John, unemployment in BC is up 0.5% from this time last year, and we've just come off the worst summer for youth unemployment in a decade. And while there has been job creation in BC, the lion's share has been in the public sector with government. What should be done to ensure there are opportunities and jobs for people in Langley, Abbotsford at local businesses and not necessarily having to go work for the government?
Yeah, well, the first thing we need, and I've touched on this in a previous response, is having a competitive economy and environment for business, and I believe that we have that in BC. There are youth. I'm hearing that there are barriers for youth for entering the workforce. Some of it is not having the appropriate skills, and so as an example, in a program we've already announced during this campaign is upping or increasing the number of skilled workers and apprenticeships in the province. We know that we are desperate for, as we have many who have been in the trades over the years retiring and getting older. We need to have more people as we've committed to building, as an example, 300,000 houses in British Columbia over the coming decade. We need the people that can build those houses, and youth are a key part of that solution. Along with that, there's other sectors we can look at. Last week, we made an announcement for the film sector, and those of us living in the Fraser Valley, I think we often see filming happening in our communities. And with the announcement we made in that sector, the estimate is that 7,000 additional jobs will be created in the film sector in Hollywood North, and a lot of those would be in the Fraser Valley. And so those, again, the types of diversification. I talked about having a investment in things like mining, and those investments are being made. That can help with the employment type work that we need here in the province. So there's lots happening. There's more work that can be done on job skills. We have, and this has been something that I've looked at when I was in federal politics as well, many sectors of the segment who are underemployed. So women in trades, Indigenous people, newcomers to Canada, in many cases, these are people who are struggling in the workforce. And so it's about how do we find them the opportunity to match them with good jobs that will help grow the provincial economy, deal with the unemployment rate, help businesses grow. And that's the type of work we need to do.
Thank you, John. I'm going to ask a follow-up question in this category, and this one's going to go to Alex Joel. Alex, John was mentioning jobs, and I think he touched on that skills training and the skills needed to fill those jobs. How will you as MLA support the education and skills training to ensure our young people in Langley, Abbotsford can access these jobs and opportunities of the future? One of the challenges we have in this region is there hasn't been enough student spaces and student seats for locals to study at our local post-secondary institutions. What's your view on the role of skills training and education, and what will you bring to that as MLA?
I appreciate the question. It's a little bit slightly different than the usual take. I did run for school trustee once in a by-election, and one of the things I did while I really studied to learn the roles of what was required for that role and the duties, I really noticed that the Langley School District in particular was leading the way in some of the programs that we are offering those students. There are some amazing skills programs already being offered right from grade 9. So what would I do specifically as an MLA? Just as an advocate here in the community, I speak about this and make sure that we have to make sure that more children know about this prior to entering that system. We need to start to follow the Swiss model. We're already in the 6th grade. These students are starting to nail down what their trades are going to be, so that when they get into grade 10, they're already at as a college level of their trade. So we're just going to follow up with the system that we have, and we're going to drill it down to the middle school level. We really want to make sure that our youth have a plan for how they're going to get there. I grew up in a generation where we were all told to go to post-secondary and take general studies. I was lucky enough to get a degree in journalism, but a lot of people left college with student debt and nothing to show for it. So we definitely, I'm just spinning my tires here and reiterating the same point. We're going to follow the same route. We're just going to encourage that further. And again, like I said, we're going to drill down to the younger kids, make sure they know their options.
Thank you for that, Alex. Our 4th topic category is housing and infrastructure. This first question I'm going to ask for each of your priorities and perspectives on this. Another key priority for our chambers in the Fraser Valley Business Coalition, and I'm sure everyone in this room, is transportation infrastructure to get around Langley Abbotsford riding. Highway 1 bisects this riding, and for much of the day it is congested, with traffic backing up commuters, slowing down truckers, and grinding business to a halt. Beyond that, this riding is barely served by transit, including a transit ghost town in the Gloucester district at Highway 1 and 264th, despite having 200 businesses employ nearly 15,000 workers. I'd like to ask each of you for your priorities and perspectives on what transportation infrastructure the Langley-Abbotsford riding needs and deserves. We'll start with John Aldag on this.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to argue that we need improvements, particularly in the Aldergrove and Abbotsford area. We are an area that's been neglected for decades. And so the provincial government right now is making the investments to add additional lanes. And anybody who drives the highway sees that that work is happening now, and there are plans to continue that work right up to Chilliwack and beyond. And so the first thing we have to do is get vehicles and people moving efficiently through the valley. When those lanes open, as part of it, there will also be a dedicated or room for transit. And Corey, I know the Chamber has advocated for this for many years, trying to get better transit to Aldergrove for the Gloucester industrial area, because there are people that want to work here and simply can't get to work, and that's not acceptable. I had worked really hard on getting SkyTrain to Langley along with some of my colleagues at both the municipal and provincial level. That's happening. That's going to bring a huge improvement to the Langleys. It'll allow buses right now that are on those routes to be able to diversify to rapid bus transit systems to help us give us that kind of expansion that we need in transit throughout our region. What I'm hearing from residents as well, and I think we all know, as soon as there's an accident on the highway, people divert. And so it's not part of the official plan right now, but I think we need to start looking at Fraser Highway and how we can do increased capacity there. I've also had people say 16th Avenue and Zero Avenue. Those are major east-west connectors for us. And so that's where you need a strong voice in Victoria who can say, these are the demands on our system. These are the pressures we're feeling. I've talked to Bob Deeth, who is an advocate for continued expansion on the north, across the river, on Lougheed and Dudney Road. And that's the kind of investments that we need to advocate for to come to our region. So there's work underway happening now. There's a lot more that needs to happen, and we need a strong government and a strong local representative to continue to make sure that we get those investments finally in our area.
Thank you, John. We'll move up the table. Karen Long, you can take this question next. And as a reminder, it's to ask what your priorities and perspectives are on what transportation infrastructure Langley-Abbotsford needs and deserves.
Thank you, Corey. We're seeing a lot of new development in Langley and West Abbotsford. Infrastructure has not kept pace. We have challenges to meet our needs for water, sewers, and schools. SkyTrain will only increase demands on Langley. As an independent MLA, I would consider supporting ideas like the Conservatives' plan, BC Conservatives' plan, to deliver $1 billion in provincial funding to local governments each year for a decade. Limited bus service in Aldergrove is a challenge for people to connect with employment opportunities in Gloucester industrial estates. Increased bus service would also benefit the Greater Vancouver Zoo's employees and volunteers. Number of people trying to get to North Aldergrove use motorized scooters to travel along 264th. This is very dangerous. In my various volunteer roles, I have tried to fight for better bus service in Aldergrove for more than a decade. The widening of Highway 1 is long overdue and way over budget. We need to start thinking long term. I support plans to build a transit exchange and truck parking at 264th and Highway 1. This would help to improve rapid bus service from BC Transit east of Langley and TransLink west of Abbotsford. Everyone knows that Fraser Highway through Aldergrove is gridlocked. This issue has been studied extensively, and unfortunately, there are big challenges to finding a solution. Aldergrove is growing. The widening of Highway 1 and improved transit has to happen now to reduce the pressure on Fraser Highway. As an independent MLA, I would push for these improvements to be sped up.
Thank you, Karen. And Alex Joel, your thoughts on this question?
SkyTrain is a white elephant. It is a project that will never be justified by its ridership. And those were studies that were done leading up to when they were trying to decide what mass transit project they were going to have. That's why they went with the light rail, because, you know, it was cheaper. But of course, Doug McCallum had other plans and, you know, steamrolled that into effect. And now it's coming to Langley. I wish I could pull all provincial funding from it immediately, but unfortunately, even if I get elected as MLA, I would have very little effect doing that. One of the things we need to do is we do need more bus service, public bus service here in the township of Langley and in West Abbotsford. But on top of that, we need to end the monopoly on mass transit. We need to allow for private bus services to start using those same bus stops. And in doing so, you're going to find that Coast Mountain is going to become a much more competitive company that's going to give better service. And no longer will people be, you know, waiting for the Fraser or the BC Transit bus strike to end, or they're going to be, you know, waiting on pins and needles whether they're going to be able to get to work or to school, because there will be a competitor that is going to be able to take care of that service. And one of the things the provincial government can also do is stop over-regulating on ride-sharing services. Yes, Uber is the most popular one, so I'll just say it. I mean, it's really the future of short-distance travel, and it took long enough for the NDP to finally legalize it here in BC, but still there are too many hurdles for people to utilize this service, and by taking away some of the regulations, we're going to drive down that cost and make it more accessible to everybody of all income levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for your input on that question. We're down to our final two questions, so we're almost there. Still in our housing and infrastructure category, I'm going to be coming our first question to Karen Long. Karen, you mentioned a few times in your responses today about the affordability challenge for housing. There's been no shortage of plans and programs for governments over the years, and yet the problem seems to only persist. What do you want to see done? What are your thoughts on how do we tackle this issue of home ownership and making it affordable and available to people again?
Well, we need to look at policies that will help young people to become first-time home buyers. We need to look at ways to support our seniors who have concerns trying to afford their housing. I mean, sometimes they'll be in a position where they have secure housing, and then something will happen and they'll have to move, and then it's hard for them to get back into an affordable rental. So just looking at policies that will look at providing more affordable housing for low income, for middle income, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Coming to our next question in the housing and infrastructure category is going to John Aldag. John, housing affordability is a top concern of residents and ranks high in our surveys of businesses as well. It's not a surprise. You're running to join the NDP government. They've introduced a series of housing policies, laws and reforms, from banning Airbnb to allowing multiple homes on single-family lots. There's been a lot of policies and laws put forward. What more would you do as an NDP MLA on the housing file if given another 4 years in government?
Well, I think that to continue dealing with the housing issue that we have, we need to continue on the path that we're on. I mentioned earlier that the projections are that we need 300,000 homes built in BC, and that work is underway. There were some municipalities that were dragging their feet. There were a lot of barriers to building it. The provincial government has stepped in to help remove those and to allow the work to happen locally. And so we need to continue on that path. And I raise that because John Rustad and the BC Conservatives have said that they would scrap those plans. They would scrap the initiatives. They would jeopardize the work that the BC NDP have already started. And that's not going to be good for housing costs. It's not going to be good for affordability. We have indicated that we will maintain some of the actions that have already been taken, the vacant homes tax, help get 20,000 homes back into circulation. That's 20,000 places that British Columbians now live in that were sitting vacant in our province. We are working with universities and colleges. When we look at Kwantlen University, I'm a huge fan of the work that they do locally, Douglas College and others. There's very limited, Kwantlen has no student housing on any of their campuses. And so if we can work with them to help house students, that frees up housing within the community for others that need it. Seniors who may be wanting to downsize, some of the foreign workers who are coming to our country, and others. We need to make sure that those are alternatives for us. So I think it really is continuing with the plan that has been put in place, making sure that it's not jeopardized through the BC Conservatives forming government. These are the things that are actually bringing down rental housing prices. It will help provide a mix in the cost of housing so that, as I mentioned, my kids and any other kids can find homes in our community, in our province, and that's what we need, is to have that future for them.
Thank you, John. My final question in the housing category is going to go to Alex Joel. Alex, I mentioned in the last question, a few of the various housing rules and regulations brought in by the BC NDP over this last term. As a Libertarian candidate, what's your perspective on these? What has gone too far, and what more needs to be done, in your view, to address housing affordability?
One of the hardest things for anybody at this table is to know what the municipalities are going to do. Of course, they have their own autonomy to do zoning and whatnot, and unfortunately, the NDP has taken the stance that they're going to put their thumb down on the municipalities. I don't necessarily disagree. We believe in decentralization as libertarians, so we think that the community should have the strongest say in what happens in your city, in your township. So what we would do is we would work with those municipalities to find a way to simplify the zoning. We saw this in Japan. They no longer have a housing affordability crisis in Japan. The federal government basically told all the cities, this is the new way that you're zoning. The development process was streamlined. While it might be counterintuitive, definitely there is a role for higher levels of government to tell the cities what to do. On top of that, we talk about the vacant homes tax, the brand new home flipping tax and the spec tax, and these are just money grabs. And you talk about 20,000 homes that were reintroduced to the market, there's not going to be another 20,000. So what we're looking for is sustainable ways to increase housing, not a one-time fix. So we're looking at ways that we're going to be able to encourage businesses to open up, build and operate more rental housing. And so we need to revisit the laws to make it more attractive to do so. Other than that, we look at the costs that are added on to building housing. The Energy Step Code, while it has good intentions, is making everything more expensive when you're built for the housing envelope. So we would pause that immediately to, again, the long-term goal is energy efficient homes, but the reality is people need a home first, and then they're going to worry about energy efficiency after. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. My final of the three individual follow-up questions is going to go to Karen Long. Karen, my first question to you was on home ownership and affordability. On your website, you also talk about affordable rentals and supports for the unhoused. Did you want to expand on what you see or what you fight for as an MLA to help those constituents who aren't homeowners but still need a place to live, like renters or the unhoused?
So as an independent MLA, I will advocate to find solutions to support affordable rentals and housing ownership policies that keep our residents from leaving our community and province, and policies that support the immigration of skilled workers to help fill the employment needs of our businesses. The number one priority to support our homeless community is to provide them with a place to live. Many organizations, including Fraser Health, Langley Community Services Society, Stepping Stones, and the Gateway of Hope, provide blanket programs and services to support the homeless once they are housed. There is also a need for additional extreme weather shelters for relief from the heat and the cold that would not only benefit the unhoused, but also seniors and families. Some roadblocks are currently preventing this from happening. As your independent MLA, I will work with all levels of government and partners to come up with a solution to address the need for the extreme weather shelters.
Thank you very much, Karen. Before we move into our closing remarks, I've got the final question here for each of you, and I'm going to ask to talk a little bit about yourselves, which politicians don't like doing that, do they? There you go, right? Yeah. But I've got a question to each of you here, and maybe I'll start with you, Alex, and come to you. I think you mentioned at the very beginning that you try to get on every ballot where you can. You're running here in this election for Langley Abbotsford for MLA. Why do you feel it's so important to be involved in the democratic process? Why are you standing up here and putting your name forward?
The first time I went to become involved in politics, I was just I was still in college, and I discovered I'm a classic liberal. So I went looking for, is there a political party that fit that outlook on life? And the Libertarian Party of Canada fit that. So unfortunately, being a smaller party, we did not have a candidate in my riding. So I stepped up and I filled that role. So I was very proud that first election, I believe, 06, I think it was 2006 in Surrey North, I had the privilege to vote for myself. The next time I ran, we had another candidate in Surrey North, so I couldn't even vote for myself that time, but at least my parents got to vote for me. I got to run in a community that I grew up in, that I had strong connections to. So the reality is that everybody up here wants to serve. So that is something that you can't take away from them. Whether you know, there is compensation, there is pensions, and there are perks to the job, but they're up here because they want to serve the community. Why do I want to do this? I'm serving an unheard sliver of the population when I'm up here and I'm talking about totally revamping some of these public policies that nobody was going to talk about up here, like privatizing, mass transit, like the buses, like talking about legalizing two-tier healthcare, which will actually allow people to get care right here in BC that otherwise they would have had to wait a year for. So that's important to me because, I mean, as part of the democratic process, I find that it's a little humbling when I, check the results at the end of the night, and people that have done absolutely no campaigning sometimes even come out with better vote totals than me because they simply said the popular thing. So I'm up here saying the hard things, and I'm really grateful, everyone, for coming out and listening. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alex. John, I'll come to you next. You made a big transition with this election. Did you want to share kind of what your thinking went into, or your decision-making process on moving from federal politics to the BC political scene? And obviously, you moved party affiliations as part of that as well. What was that decision-making process like?
Yeah, thanks. And this is a conversation that comes up in the doorstep, so I'm happy to have it here. As Corey, as he's referring, I was a Liberal member of Parliament for 2 terms. I was elected first 2015, then not elected, involuntarily retired in 2019, and then returned in 2021. And I love the job as Member of Parliament. It's a huge honor to serve in the House of Commons. But there are a lot of issues, and it's hard to take the things that are important at home and move them forward on that scale, or in that forum. A lot of the things I hear on the doorsteps are provincial jurisdiction, and that's a simple reality. I hear about the crowded schools, the need for better medical care, for housing, affordability issues. And so a lot of what I was trying to fight in Ottawa on the national scale really is something that are issues that are really the responsibility more municipally and provincially. We're also becoming empty nesters this year. As I said, my wife is a busy doctor with shift work. We have a nice place that we love, and with pets that need some care. And I thought maybe it's time to get a bit closer to home. I looked at the values of the Liberal Party federally and the NDP provincially. With the implosion of the BC Liberals, that center space is completely vacant right now. And I actually find that a lot of the values that I hold as a Canadian and as a British Columbian are very similar between the what I was federally and where the David Eby and his team are provincially. making the investments in community, looking after those that may need some help at this point in their lives, trying to build a better community. And that's where, I've poured my heart and soul into that. And so to me, it was a difficult decision, but I'm very honored when David Eby and his team reached out and said, we have a new riding. We're looking for a strong candidate that can meet the needs of this community, the growing challenges they have, and we think you'd be a good one. And so I have given up everything that I loved, and I'm all in on this one. And I think I could make a change provincially, and I'd be honored if I'm given that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And then coming to Karen Long. Karen, in conversations with you and your literature, I think you make it very clear that you're running as an independent, you're not a politician. I think your motto is doing politics differently. What drove you to get involved in the campaign this year? If this is your first time running, I think. So what got you to put your name forward?
Well, it's just like Rotary. When the only time you get to say no is when you're asked. So I was asked to run as a candidate for BC United. I thought long and hard about it. I consulted with my family and my close friends, and they said, Karen, you know what? Not many people get this opportunity. You don't want to look back and think that maybe you should have given it a try. So I did. Like Alex was mentioning, my whole life is been in service in my community in many different capacities. I'm a type of person that doesn't say no. I take on a challenge. Like starting the Langley Volunteer Bureau was huge. We made such a huge impact in the community, connecting students with seniors, and it's just the faces on the volunteers and the seniors when they volunteer or when they help others. So I am not your average politician. I'm normally in the back room organizing events, planning, strategizing, trying to make things happen. So as you can see, probably with public speaking, it's very convenient for me if I have the questions and I can research them and answer them very articulately. So I appreciate the bit of the heads up that we got from Corey and the chamber. But anyway, so I'm here to do my best. I am who I am. I have high values. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I work incredibly hard. I'm very committed. So this is the type of person that I am. So that's me.
Thank you, Karen. That brings us to the end of our formal questions. I'd now like to offer each of you up to 2 minutes to make closing remarks. I think we worked our way left to right last time, so maybe we'll start with Alex and work our way that direction. So 2 minutes, any closing remarks or final statements before we wrap up here tonight?
There's not too much more left to say. We really believe that the strength of the democratic process is having more options on the ballot. So I'm happy to be one of those options. And this time we have the privilege of also having a couple people running as independents. So we'll really see, it's a different dynamic than I'm used to seeing. Unfortunately, we have the Green Party candidate and the Conservative, BC Conservative member weren't here. We would love to have heard their own takes on this. But BC Libertarian Party, we just stand for, in general, less government. We believe that you know how to live your life better than the government does. We want to strip away all the layers of bureaucracy that we can, cut the fat, so that we don't have to cut the service, because a lot of people are depending on it. They've depended on it their entire lives. We want to cut taxes because we know that affordability of many things has been ruined by inflation that was caused by our federal government's fiscal and monetary policies. So what we are doing as a political party is advocating that in every community that we're running. We're not running a full slate. So you guys have the privilege of hearing this message where somebody in a neighboring riding will not. So again, make sure that you tell your friends that you heard a libertarian talk today, because it's like a white unicorn these days, because our opinions are not always very popular. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex Joel. And Karen Long, closing statements.
Again, I'd like to thank the Chambers for hosting tonight, and thank you to all of you for coming out to hear most of the candidates speak. I've lived and been involved in this community for over 25 years. I know the issues and concerns. I have the connections, work ethic, and leadership experience to get things done. As I mentioned earlier, this is a historic time in BC politics. I was proud to be running as a BC United, formerly BC Liberals candidate. I've put in 9 months into campaigning because I believe I can be an effective MLA for this riding, maybe even more so running as an independent. There are many qualified independent candidates running because they feel that a center-right option was stripped away from voters. In all of my many roles as a community leader, I have always consulted widely to try to find common sense solutions. Independent MLAs may hold the balance of power in our next government, and I want Langley Abbotsford to have a seat at that table in Victoria. I have been committed to this community, heart and soul, for decades. October 19th, please vote Karen Long, your independent candidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. And wrapping us up, John Aldag.
Great. Well, yes, thanks to each of you for making time to spend the evening with us. Time is a valuable commodity, and I really appreciate you coming out and engaging with us in this way. I have to say, as my colleagues did, I find it shameful, quite frankly, that particularly the parties who want to form government are not here and not part of the conversation. The Conservatives have said that they're not going to come to any of these debates because they want to have conversations with people. And to me, what are you? These are real meaningful conversations. There's good questions, they're thoughtful questions. And I can tell you, I was outdoor knocking for almost 6 hours today. And I would have loved to have continued out having those conversations on the doorsteps. But I knew that this was on, and I made it my practice today to be a bit more disciplined in the conversations that I had, hearing the concerns of the voters. Today we were in Aldergrove, the residents here. But I walked a little bit faster between the houses so that I could make sure that I had time here. So giving this excuse that you can't come and listen and participate in this kind of forum, I think is disingenuous. And I just really I think it begs the question, what kind of government would the BC Conservatives form in particular? I've known Karen for many years. We have crossed paths on the volunteer circuit. I've been involved, as she has, in many organizations here. I've poured my heart and soul into this community. When I go and do presentations at school groups, kids often say, "How old are you?" And I say, 40 years old. That's how hard politics are on you. It takes a lot out of you. I'm not really 40. But I've given a lot to this community, and I'm ready to continue giving. There's a lot of challenges. We're a growing community. It reminds me a lot of the prairie towns that I grew up in, with the heart that we have seen in Langley and Abbotsford. But we're changing, and we need to have people that continue to invest in those. And that's why I'm putting my name forward. That's why I've made a very difficult professional decision to switch kind of streams at this point in my life. And I gladly stand as the NDP candidate in Langley and Langley Abbotsford for this election. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And John, Alex, Karen, thank you very much for coming and sharing your perspectives and joining us. Maybe I can ask everyone to give a round of applause and thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us, and those watching, thank you. Remember, Election Day is October 19th. Online and telephone voter registration closes on October 7th. So if you're not registered, please make sure you do that. And advanced voting is on October 10th to 13th, and then 15th and 16th. So Elections BC has all the locations where you can go and vote in advance. The recordings of tonight's discussions will be shared on the Langley Chamber's website and YouTube channel as soon as they are ready. We already have the videos from our sessions with the Walnut Grove and Willowbrook ridings. So that concludes tonight's event. Again, candidates, thank you very much for taking the time. All of you, thank you for being here, and have a safe drive home.